Good evening, folks. Chris here again. So today I wanted to do a quick video on a point and shoot Arch install because I've been having some issues getting this set up to my liking on a server, and I find the Arch install wiki to be complete, but some ways lacking, I suppose, for brand new people. So the first thing that I did, so everyone is aware, if you have some machine and you boot into the install media, I just created a USB disk. I like to work on my own computer, as you can tell by the background here. So if you install on here Open Ssh, then you can I'm sorry, OpenVPN. No, Open Ssh. Yes, Open Ssh. Then you can go wherever you want to go. So first thing you have to do is change the password. So that's a simple passwd command. So enter your password. Then you'll want to install Open Ssh, so you can do pacman -sy. This is the only time you ever want to do sy because it doesn't actually update the system, but you don't want to go through all of that on your install media because it's not the system you're going to be working on. So you can say Open Ssh, and then it will go back through and find it for you, and you will say, yes, that is in fact what I want to install. And then you'll have to enable it, or rather start it. It won't let you enable on the install media. So systemctl start sshd.service. Hopefully it doesn't kick me. Okay, there we are. And then you'll do an IP address to go figure out where exactly this machine can be found. So what you're looking for here is a line kind of like that. It says I'm at 192.168.1.141. Okay, so then you can simply ssh 192.168.1.141. Sorry, rather root at 192.168.1.141 and enter that password you just created. I'm not going to do that because I'm already past that step. So if I clear the screen here, what we're going to do is an Arch Linux install. So the first thing that you are going to want to do is check your boot mode. So for most systems now, that's going to be a UEFI boot, and you can tell if you're in that mode by doing the following. You can ls/sys firmware EFI bears, and if you get anything there, then you're doing EFI boot. If you can't see anything in there, then it's a BIOS boot, which just kind of changes the way that your bootloader is going to work for the Arch install. I'll try to cover both of these, at least in the notes. So the first thing that we have to do here then is set up a drive. So if you do lsblk, list your block devices, I'm going to use this SDG that I have here. So you see the other ones, I just have kind of one partition set up, just because I was trying to process of elimination, remove signatures, and so on and so forth. SDF here is the install media. So the first thing we're going to do is fire up Fdisk, clear. So we're going to do Fdisk /dev/SDG. And so if we press M for help, that's what we want. I'm going to start actually down here. So if you are working on a UEFI booting machine, you're going to need this GPT partition table, which is G. If you are working on BIOS boot, you need an MBR partition table, master boot record. So you have to actually go back to older versions of Fdisk, or you have to hack it to make that work. Not actually going to go over that, but you can Google that if that's what you need to do. So we're going to make that partition table, and then we're going to start putting partitions on it. So the first thing that we need is we need a boot partition where the bootloader is going to live. So I'm going to start with a new partition number 1 by default. I'm going to start on the default first sector, and then I'm going to add 100 megabytes to that sector. So I started with 50, and that was not big enough for this last run, so I think 100 will be sufficient. And it says it contains a VFAT signature. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and remove any signatures that we find because I'm going to re-add them later. It just kind of indicates how we formatted the drives. So the next thing we're going to do is make our second partition, which will be swap. So do you need a swap partition? I guess there's some debate on that. I'm going to put one on here. So new partition number 2. I do not intend to actually suspend to this disk, so it doesn't have to be very large. I think the best logic is that your minimum is supposed to be 4 gigabytes, and then you're supposed to add half of your RAM, or 8 gigabytes, whichever is more. So I'm going to go ahead and do the first sector where it is, and then I'm going to add 8 gigabytes. And then we have a file system type on there. Oh, right, and I didn't change the file system types for the other one. So let's do that first. So if I go M and I say T for change partition type, I'm going to do that. I'm actually going to change one because I forgot it. And I'm going to list all the types. And the very first one that I need is actually an EFI system because this is UEFI boot. If this were a BIOS boot, I would use number 4 for the BIOS boot. So I'm going to go ahead and press Q here to get out of less. And I'm going to change that to be type number 1. Okay, then I'm going to do that again, change the type on partition 2. And that's going to be, if I list them, it's number 19, Linux swap. So 19. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the last one. I'm going to create the partition where root's going to live. You can make extra ones for home or anything else if you want. I like to do it kind of all at once because if I'm kind of nuking the system, I have other places I'm going to back up my home directory. So let's make another new one, partition 3, and we'll just take the defaults wherever it starts, and then it will by default go to the end. And then I'm going to change the type. Oh, I guess I didn't really have to because it's already Linux file system, but I'm going to do that anyway. And then list them, and I'm going to see number 20 there is Linux file system, which is what I want. So let's see. So let's do 20. Okay. So now we are all set up here. So I need to write the table. So that's W. And then we're done. So I'm going to call sync again just for giggles here and clear. The next thing that we're going to want to do is I want to make this install process go kind of fast. Well, no, the first thing we should actually do is set those up. So let's do our partition generation. Let's start with partition 1. So we got to make a fat partition for our EFI boot directory. So we're going to do mkfs. Sorry, I think it's actually not that. What is it? No, it is. It's mkfs.fat minus f32. Oh, well, let's double check this. Where are we? SDG. Okay. So here we go. We're going to mkfs fat 32 dev sdg 1. And then we're going to run that. Okay, now we need to put swap on partition 2. So we're going to do make swap on /dev /sdg2. Okay, and then we need to set up our third drive. So we're going to mkfs.ext4 dev sdg3. That's where we're going to put our file system. Takes just a minute. And I guess I should say you can make the same kind of structure for a BIOS boot. We're just not going to, if you do BIOS boot, just don't mount that first partition. So let's see. So what are we going to do here? Let's set up our mounting. So we're going to do, let's set up swap first, swap on, dev sdg2. We are going to mount dev sdg3 at /mnt. And then we got to make the boot directory here. So we're going to make a directory, mount boot. And at that point, we're going to mount our first drive. So dev sdg1 mount boot. Okay, now we're going to speed up our installation here. So we're going to do that with Reflector. It's a cool little tool that checks all your open mirrors. Pacman minus sy again, because we're just installing for this quick kind of bootstrap process. Reflector. And there it is, reinstalling. Okay, sure, fine. We'll reinstall it, why not? Okay, and then we're going to call that, and we're going to do reflector B for the country, US minus F. We want 12 of them. We want to list 12 of them. We want, I don't know, 12 of them. I don't know what all those flags are. Verbose, save, etc, pacman.d, mirror list. Okay, and that'll take just a minute. And then we're going to set up our time really quick. Time date CTL, set NTP, true, just means we want internet time to make sure we're accurate. Okay, now then, the thing that we want to do is actually start the install process. So to do that, we are going to install a few things on that mount folder that we mounted everything to. So we're going to do hackstrap into mount base devel Linux headers, Linux firmware, and gvim. So this is just installing basically pack stuff. Well, I guess it's doing more than that. It's whatever you want to put in that list. It's like calling pacman. So we're going to install on mount these programs. So let's let that run. This will go pretty greasy fast since we've just checked all of our mirrors. So we'll give that just a minute. And then we're into the easy setup part once all of these packages are installed and our hooks are complete. Basically, we have one more step here that we want to do before we move on to the new system with the full install and start setting it up to our liking. The next thing we have to do is set up the fstab file, which is going to say where all of our drives are supposed to be mounted by default. And then we'll get into configuring. It's taking a hot minute. If I get fancy, I'll speed up this part of the video. I don't know if I'm that fancy. Kind of watching paint dry here. Okay, good, we're done. Okay, so I'm going to clear this. And the next thing that we're going to do is gen fstab, and we're going to use -u, which is going to use the UUIDs, which means if we change the order of the drives and that, like, dev, SD, whatever gets mixed up, the system will still know where to go to mount drives. And we're going to do whatever the mount configuration is right now, and we're going to add that to /mount/etc/fstab. Bam, there we are. Okay, now we're ready to get started. Arch root/mnt. So this is getting us into the new system, and it's already kind of working, so that's great. The next thing we're going to do is set up time zones. So we're going to make a symbolic link. Share zone info. So you can go through this tree and figure out where you are to make sure you get the right time zone, and we're symbolic linking that to etc/local time. Okay, once we've done that, we can set up the hardware clock. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is set up our locales. So I like to alias e equals vim, so I can just do e etc locale.gen. Okay, so now this is kind of hard to read, but we want this en us utf8, this thing right here. We're going to go find where it appears. So we're going to /en us.utf8. This is not going to work as nicely as we want. I think you have to have the capitalization in there for that to work. And n, so it's way down here, this line. And then we're going to write and quit. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is generate those locales. Locale gen. Going to take just a second. Okay, then we need to set up our locale.conf. And we're going to do lang equals, just what we just did, en_us.utf8, and save. Okay, now we got to set up the host name. So etc hosts. Okay, and we're going to do, we'll say it's the second server. Oops. There. Here we are, and then we're going to set up our hosts file. Oh, sorry, that was what I already did. Host name is what I meant here. Okay, there's that, and now we're going to actually do etc hosts the right way, not go there. What instead goes here is 127.0.0.1, which says where home is, localhost. We're going to do the IPv6 here. localhost, and then we're going to do 127.0.1.1. Going to be srv02.local domain srv02. Save that. Now we're going to change the root password here. This is the local root, what we actually want. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is install Grub. And then if you're doing BIOS boot, you only need Grub. If you're doing a UEFI boot, then you need also EFI boot manager. And I'm also going to install OS Prober. Not that I need it right now, but I know I'm going to need it later. Okay, we'll install those. And now we get to actually install Grub. So let's see. So we're going to do Grub install. This is also, if you look in the Arch Wiki and the Grub pages, you can get all of these commands. Target equals x86 underscore 64 EFI. EFI directory. This is wherever you mounted that first partition. I put it in /boot. It's local to kind of where we are now, since we're in what used to be the /mnt folder. And then we gotta say bootloader ID equals Grub. And now it's gonna go install. We'll wait for it. Okay. And now our kind of most forgotten command here. We got to make a config file for Grub to read. If you ever forget this, you'll get into the Grub boot at the very beginning of your post. Well, at the end of your post, I guess, when it's booting and nobody wants to be there. Make that config file. Boot grub.cfg. Bang. Okay, so if you're doing BIOS boot, it's all the same steps, except that you have to point it towards like /devsdg in this case. But that's all set. The next thing to do is decide what you're going to do for networking. Since this machine is always going to be connected to an Ethernet cable, I'm going to do this with systemd. You could at this point use Network Manager. That is my preferred easy way of doing things. But I like systemd for this particular use case. So just for the sake of being minimal, etc systemd network. Okay, so in here we got to make a couple of files. Well, I guess the first thing we should do is ipaddr. So you see all these devices start with en. So we're gonna kind of make our lives easy, and we're gonna say en.network. This is our network thing, and we're gonna say match any devices that look like name equals en star. Then we're gonna say our network is going to be DHCP equals IPv4. Okay. With that, then we need to set everything up. So we'll systemctl enable systemd network d. Okay, then we'll need to enable systemctl enable systemd resolve D, so we get a resolver, and we'll need, so our time stays right, ctl enable systemd or dash timesync D. Okay, and then we'll need a user here. So let's do, let's see, user add -mg. So I want to have a home directory into the users group with a shell bin bash, because I'll set up zsh later. Kezra, so that'll be me. And then user mod -ag. We're going to add to group, wheel, me, and set a password. Okay, then we're going to edit /etc sudoers, and we're going to go down to wheel, because I like not to have to enter a password all the time. Oh, look, it's a read-only file. We're going to use a little trick here, and we're going to do, oops. So we're going to do w bang sudo t%, and then we're gonna, I guess we'll just load it, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then just to make sure that it worked, we're gonna do the same command again, and we'll see that we are fixed up. Who cares? Read only. Who cares? Okay, so we'll quit there, and then I think that's the whole story. So let's see if this will boot. So let's do, well, let's think. Okay, so we set up the partitions. We mounted the partitions. We set up the file system. Then we used Reflector. We set up the operating system. We went in, we created a user. We set up the network. We set up the locales. Yes, I think that's all. So we're actually don't need sudo. What am I saying? Reboot now. Oh, right. I guess we should unmount all these things nicely and then do that. So let's, I'm going to Control D to get out of that. So I'm out of the chroot environment. I'm going to unmount /mnt. Okay, I'm actually going to unmount mnt/boot. umount. Yes, I would like to change that. Thank you. And then now we can get that done. And then we can swap off dev sdg2. And now we are clean. So we can boot now. And if all is well, I'll be back in just a second to log into the real machine. All right, all, welcome back. I waited overnight for the system to reboot. Realized I made one mistake that I didn't show on here. So the first thing that you want to do after you finish your complete install is probably, just as I discussed in the beginning of the video, install Open Ssh and enable it so that you can SSH back into the system. So now that I've done that, you can see this is the machine that we were working on last night. And here we are. We are inside, and then just as a little show here so you can get a feel for how much space you need in boot. So I put on 100 megabytes here. Looks like I needed about 60 of that, so 50 was indeed too small. But we're up and running, and that's the full UEFI Arch Linux install. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.